Hi everyone, welcome back to our new season of New Breakpoint. My name is Michelle Sanford and I am the Developer Engagement Lead here for Microsoft in Australia and New Zealand. New Breakpoint is a show for developers and by developers, and it goes out on the second Thursday of every month. If you can join us in that show, then we do live Q&A during the session. If you can't, please do register and you will still be able to watch that episode on demand. Today I have a special celebrity guest with me. It is our Microsoft's VP of Developer Community, Scott Hanselman. He does not like that introduction. He prefers to just be a developer amongst us. He has his own podcast called Hansel Minutes. He has been writing, teaching, sharing, and coding for more than 20 years.
32 years.
32 years. Yeah, 20 years is perhaps a little flattering.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a minute.
Yeah. So I'm super excited to have him with us on the show. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be down under. I very much. We would have done this remotely, but we're here in person, which makes it just that much more fun.
Oh, it's so exciting. When are you going to show us?
I want to show you my command prompt. I want to show you how to drive stick shift. I want to show you developer boxes. I want to show you Visual Studio Code, WSL, Ubuntu, fun directory icons, and more. I'm a big fan of a tool called Oh My Posh. It's a tool that lets you extend your PowerShell command prompt or your ZSH or Bash command prompt. And I thought it'd be cool to look at that because I may be more of a command prompt person than you are. I don't know, do you spend a lot of time with the command prompt or do you spend more time in a GUI?
So I was looking at this last night and I was just thinking, why?
Why would you do
that?
But
then I thought, is it so much more than me picking themes in VS Code? Is it?
Well, so let me ask you this. Do you drive a manual shift or an automatic?
Manual.
Okay, there you go. Why do you drive a manual? Do you enjoy the knowing what your car is doing? Do you enjoy going into second gear?
I have a sports car and it would be embarrassing to drive that as an automatic.
Okay. I also have a sports car. My sports car is a Surface Laptop Studio 2, and I sometimes like to drive stick. And in driving stick, what I'm saying is that you can drive an automatic. It'll get you from point A to point B. If you use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, those tools allow you to get where you want to go. And they're ultimately calling out to the command line. They're shelling out to different stuff. But sometimes you just want to drive your sports car. You want to know exactly what's going on. You want to double clutch or whatever. So I alternate between doing work in Visual Studio, which is great. It's a whole dashboard. Here's one of the labs that we were working on. So I bring that up, and I've got all these windows that start popping up, and tool tips and details and logs, and it's all very colorful. This is actually my Beyonce theme. Did I show you this? This is a theme. It's actually called Beyonce. If you go to BeyonceTheme.com, this is done by Mina Markham, and we've got Beyonce-themed stuff for Visual Studio Code. I did the one for Terminal and VS. So if you like Beyonce like I do, this is my Beyonce theme. But when I want to drive stick shift, I switch out to the command line. And now most command line people are used to a command line that looks like this, right? You've done this before. It's gray, it's boring, it's DOS.
Right.
It's not really DOS, but it looks like DOS, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. I grew up, of course, in a time where my command line looked like this, which is, this is Ubuntu with a CRT filter. So I've actually got a filter set up here, and I can actually go full screen, and it looks like warped like a CRT. It's also kind of boring, but it's kind of cool that I've applied those 3D filters. But I like to have my prompt a little bit more fun because I want to spend time there. Let's see what we can do. So what I'm using is a tool called Oh My Posh. It's done by a gentleman named Jan de Dobbeler. You can go to ohmyposh.dev. And what it is it's a theming engine for prompts for shells. So just like you like to theme your Visual Studio to look the way that you want it to look, I've done that with my Beyonce theme. I can also theme my prompt and pick whatever shell I want. Now I use PowerShell. This is not specific to PowerShell. I can do it on any prompt that I want. So right here you can see a couple of things. You've got my home directory, and then what do you think that is?
I know what that is.
You know what that is. That is my blood sugar. Right, so I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I have an implant in my arm, and I also have an insulin pump down here, and all of that is talking to my phone, which is talking to the cloud, and that's basically running my pancreas, because I don't have a working pancreas. So that's my blood sugar. If I press Z and switch over to here, Z is what I use to change directories. I'll talk about that in a second. I have this ridiculous prompt. There's a folder. There's my blood sugar with a trend line. There's my Git prompt. There's that I have modified and unknown currently Git files in my Git status. This is the version of .NET. That's the Visual Studio icon. And then over here, what do you guess that one is? That's new.
Well, that's a deploy or a ship button.
Little rocket ship. That is an icon to indicate that I'm on a developer drive. So if I go to my C drive, I don't have that. If I go to my D drive, the rocket ship appears. So that's a faster drive. It's a custom drive just for developers that we can talk about a little bit as well. And then notice this here. That's how long the last command took to run, 9 milliseconds. All of that, all in this kind of ridiculous prompt. But you'll notice as I move around, the prompt changes, showing different things for different folders.
Does the blood sugar one change color?
The blood sugar one will change color, and it will change the arrow that is showing a trend line will go up or down based on what's going on. And I need to know my blood sugar at all time, because if I get locked in, I want to pay attention to my Git prompt and what's happening, and then if I see my blood sugar go down, I will deal with it.
That's so useful.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, that's actually running in a Mongo database using an open source project called Night Scout. And then this prompt updates every 5 minutes, and we'll see that update as well.
Very cool.
Okay. And then I've even blinged out my directory as well. So when I type dir, you can see I've got icons for my DOS command here, my shell script, Git icons. That's using a thing called directory icons. And then that's themed with my colorful pink and blue and purple Beyonce theme as well.
How long did it take you to set up all of this?
Probably a couple of hours. I mean, but here's the thing. Why would you do that? Does your sports car, is it stock, or have you customized it?
I haven't customized it. I bought it because it was a really good price for what it is.
Okay.
I had had just a little Nissan Micra before that for years, and I couldn't bring myself to buy any other car because they were so expensive for what they were. And then this car came out, and they started comparing it to cars that were double the price.
Okay, so it was priced for you.
And so, well, price, and also it looks gorgeous.
But do you have like seat covers, or have you put any pictures, anything dangling from the rearview mirror?
No.
Okay, well maybe my analogy won't work, but my car's got, it's my nest. So when you make a nest, whether it be your home office or whether it be your car or your laptop, for me, this right here, what we can see on the screen right now, feeds my spirit more than that.
Yeah, and it looks less scary. It looks like it's friendly and
bright
fun.
and fun and silly, and I like it. And each one of these are called segments with Oh My Posh, can be configured. So for example, this blood sugar segment, which is called Night Scout, is a segment that now ships with Oh My Posh. So if it's a pretty obscure segment. I don't think there's a lot of diabetics that are doing this, but you can have an Azure DevOps one, or Git one, Node, or Python, or Rust, or .NET, and each one of these segments here can be set up. So right here, I've actually got a template that says, if my blood sugar is greater than 150, change the color to red. If my blood sugar is lower than, say, actually this is red and that's yellow. So you get the idea. I've actually got a if greater than, if less than, and then this is the default red, green, blue, so that's the green prompt. It's evaluating all of that each time. And then down here, we've got the .NET version, and then the color, and then a template that describes. So you can set these up any way that you want. And then if you go to Oh My Posh and go to the docs over here, where it says segments, look at this. Azure functions, battery, whatever the thing that you're into, there is a segment that you can get excited about, Java or Node or whatever. And then set these up the way you want, and then theme them and make them colorful. And then again, you can use that anywhere. And installation is super easy. It works on Windows, Mac, or Linux. And it also has these fonts. And I want to call out those fonts because these are another fun way for you to customize your sports car in this case. Notice, of course, that I've got a insulin syringe there. I've got my Git branch. If I look over here, we've got the rocket ship that we mentioned, this stopwatch, and the Visual Studio icon. Those are not normal fonts. So where are those coming from? Any guesses? It is coming from nerdfonts.com. And Nerdfonts is a font aggregator. I just learned about this a couple of years ago. This is crazy. Turns out there's over 9,000 potential icons that you could put into your fonts. Right? There's all the regular stuff for different languages and in English and Chinese and all that kind of stuff. But then Nerdfonts are developer icons. Look at this. There's 200 developer icons. You've got Linux and Apple and databases and the GitHub Octocat. You've got weather ones and all these different icons. So you can go and say, I want my favorite font, which is in my case Cascadia Code, plus the nerd fonts, and you can basically build your own fonts. And if you go to downloads, these are all programmer fonts. What do you use for your coding? Do you use Consolas or you're just kind of the standard? So you'd find Consolas plus, or here, look, here you go. Here's Comic Sans plus the nerd glyphs, right? So for me, I use Cascadia Code. So then here's Cascadia Mono with, it's like Cascadia Code, then they've added those. And if you want to see what they look like, programmingfonts.org is a website that actually pops up. Check this out. Isn't this wonderful? As I click on the left-hand side, it has a preview of these fonts. You can find the one that makes you happy. Isn't that great? Look at that. So here's some just awful, I would not want to do that. There you go. There's Consolas plus the nerd fonts, and they just have a little bit of sample code over there. Some of these are pretty out there, but yeah, there's a hacker font. Then you pick the one you want, you go back, you download it, and then in my case, inside of Windows Terminal, if I go to Settings, down here to Appearance, I can go and change the appearance, the color, the look, the feel of all of these different things, including my default fonts. And then if I want to, like in this example, I could apply a 3D filter. So I've made this look like a CRT. And if you zoom in, you can see the scan lines of the CRT. And then if you look carefully, there'll be a scan line that'll kind of like roll by occasionally as well. Isn't that silly?
That's very cute.
Like, why not, right?
Yeah.
Because it's stupid. It's awesome, though.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I was watching it, I was just thinking that's a level of obsession I had not even considered going to. But now that I see it.
I appreciate you call it obsession. I just think like it's your space. It's your little sports car. It's your nest. It's your office. Like a lot of us during COVID years ago, we found ourselves working at home. We found ourselves working on laptops on the kitchen counter. But can I put pictures around that like reflect my family or my values or my space? Can you make your nest? It could be adding plants. It could be picking favorite books and putting them on the shelf, right? That level of customization should be done anywhere where you spend a large amount of time. So I decided I'm spending a large amount of time at the command line. I'm going to tweak it a little bit. But then I want to call out where it's stored, though. It's in my OneDrive. So yes, it took me a little while, but now it's in OneDrive and it is showing up everywhere. So I have that customization on all my machines.
That's perfect.
Isn't that fun? I've also got some autocomplete here. So you see when I start typing, I've got history. It's showing up down here. And then I mentioned that I use a thing called Z. Rather than change directory and CDing around, I use Z, which is a tool that keeps track of where you've been and allows you to get back there really, really quickly. Isn't that great? The other thing I've been working on lately, which is kind of crazy, did you know that there's an app called the Windows app? Have you heard about this?
No.
There's literally an app called Windows app, and you can run it on iPad. You can run it on a Mac. It showed up in the news recently. So I've been using developer boxes, right? DevBoxes, Azure virtual machines out in the cloud somewhere. And a DevBox is a virtual machine that I can remote desktop into from like an iPad or from a Mac or whatever. And this Windows app allows you to run Windows basically anywhere. You're remote desktoping in. Now this laptop is a pretty good laptop, but it's not a 16 CPU, 64 gigs of RAM supercomputer in the cloud. But with a Windows Developer Box, I can go and remote in, and it gets integrated into Windows. If you look down here in the lower corner, notice that I've got my virtual desktop, Desktop 1, and I've got another one called Hanselman Projects. That is a virtual machine in the cloud that I can four-finger swipe and go to a virtual desktop. I'm in the local machine, I'm in the cloud. I'm in the local machine, I'm in the cloud.
So the Windows app is a DevBox?
It's a launching machine. It's a launch box into all of my virtual machines. So right now I'm firing this one up. I shut it down when I was on the airplane. You can see it says last connected 1 day ago. I can click down here and I can say, do I want it in the task view? Do I want to pin that box? Because I might have one box per project, or I might have one box per organization that I'm working with. So I'm spinning that one up. So now it's going to have me authenticate. So I'm authenticating. I just did Windows Hello there. You saw it looked at my face. And then in a moment here, it's going to jump from my local machine to that machine. I'm going to close stuff down here while we wait for that. Hopefully my internet here at the studio, there you go, just popped. Okay, so now this is my other machine, and I can have that machine exist on multiple desktops because it can be integrated with this task view. Or in this case, I could also set up a separate virtual machine like this. So there's my VM that I'm logging into, and there's the stuff we were working on before. So if I go back to my main screen here, I'm going to pull that down here and throw it into the desktop. So I'm going four-finger swipe between machines, right? And I'll have that be full screen. So now I'm going back and forth between local and remote. But that is now integrated into newer versions of Windows, so I could just click here and connect between the two. Now before, when they were telling us, hey, we want you to do some work on developer boxes, I was like, I don't want any part of that. I want to be local dev. But when those machines are faster than my local machine and everything just is there and ready and set up the way I want it, look, I've got Visual Studio, I've got Dev Home, I've got VS Home, I've got WSL, I've got Ubuntu, all of these things ready to go. The only thing that I can do to tell that I'm on the remote machine is I've changed the color of my mouse. You see how it's blue there and it's green over here?
Oh, that's helpful.
Isn't that cool? So I did most of the workshop yesterday. Look how fast Visual Studio started up. It's bringing up my studio. And if I go and click on Task Manager, if I didn't tell you that this was a remote machine, you wouldn't even ask. Look at that. 64-core AMD processor, 64 gigs of RAM, 2 terabyte hard drive. Come back over here, check email, switch back, do my work. How cool is that?
I love
and then,
that.
do you notice my prompt?
Yeah, same.
Same prompt, blinged out the way I want because it's synced from my OneDrive. Isn't that wonderful?
Well, no one would even think that was a remote machine because it's so fast, but it's so much faster because it is a much more powerful machine in the cloud.
But it's also that tweaking, like it's not your grandmother's RDP, remote desktop protocol. Like back in the day, you would remote in and you'd be like moving your mouse and it would be slow. But there's new technologies that are happening. I can even log in to devbox.microsoft.com without the remote desktop app and do it just in JavaScript in the browser. And they've used that same technology that they did with the Xbox remote streaming to lower the milliseconds of delay to like 12 or sub 10 milliseconds. So when I'm over there and I'm doing my work, I'm clicking around, I'm moving, it feels fast enough for me to use as a machine. And that was for me the difference. Like I'm not going to use a remote machine if it feels like it's remote. So I think that's pretty cool. You can see it's got all the things I want, and you can even see right there, Damien made a change right there 6 days ago. I can click, and I've got all the tools logged in and set and ready to go. And here it's even saying to enable Copilot, I could go and add my GitHub account if I wanted to, enter my credentials, and then log in to have GitHub Copilot as well. How fun is that?
It's amazing.
I love it. I'm having all kinds of fun. You gotta customize your stuff. Just as Abel said, we don't accept the defaults.
Right. And we've got to do what Abel said because he is a legend.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've even got my Abel, I should have brought my Abel Wang t-shirt that says do not accept the defaults. This idea of not accepting the defaults, because Abel passed away of cancer a couple years ago, was that when you install software, a lot of people just go next, 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 finish. They don't know what weird stuff it installed and what crazy side effects it's going to have on their life. So Abel would always click custom. He would always click custom and he'd want to look at the options. What are the options? What can I do here to make this better for me? And then he would hit next and then hit finish. So he applied that to his life. He did not accept the defaults in his life. He always did something different and custom for himself. And that's how he lived and that's how he passed away.
I was just talking to April before and she was showing us code spaces and I was saying that kind of what you've got in DevBox it is kind of the reason I use code spaces so much now. I don't want to mess up my own individual machine. I just want to open containers that have everything that there is already on them. And that's one of the big advantages of DevBox for whole teams.
Exactly.
You don't have to spend those hours, or even weeks. Like companies were spending weeks setting up individual developer machines for devs to go on each project.
That's right. And what you can also do is have templates. So you mentioned setting up for your team. Your team could say, I want to make sure that everyone has GitHub Copilot. I want to make sure everyone has GitLens installed, or I want everyone's prompt to be colorful and silly like mine. I could impose my will on the team, and everyone could have an awesome prompt setup like this as well. You remember how I told you that I set up icons for having developer drives? And check this out. Look in the corner here next to my blood sugar. Do you see that icon? I even have a custom prompt showing that I'm on a DevBox. So remember how it's so good you would get confused that you're actually on this machine.
Yeah.
If I'm over here on my local machine, I look at my prompt, I've got my blood sugar, there you go, I'm on a dev drive. If I switch over to the developer box, I'm on a dev box and I've actually got it respected and reflected there in my prompt.
That is so useful, yeah.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, I'm doing all kinds of silly stuff and I encourage you to do it as well. So then I switch over to the Aspire folder and then I can see my Git prompt, Visual Studio, and I'm on a dev box. And then if I shut it down, of course, like any remote system, I'm back to where I was before, and that machine is just sitting there and it'll fall asleep tonight if I don't use it to save money.
That's another glorious thing. Do you remember in the old days where you would just spin up your...
Yeah, I would spin something up, get on an airplane, and then land and like find out that I owe a bill. Yeah, that'll fall asleep automatically, but I can also just click here and I can shut it off, pin it to my home, to my taskbar, and I can also see all of the different places and jump boxes I could get. Now, of course, even as fast as that was going, that's in the west of the US. But I could go and pick a different region, of course, for it to be even faster. But yeah, speed of light is the only thing that's limiting me at this point.
And a bit of money?
There is a bit of money. I don't have to pay for that because the boss pays for it. But certainly if you get a DevBox, it could be cheaper than paying for a giant laptop.
Something to consider.
Indeed, indeed. Options it's all about options.
Yeah, well, definitely organisations are finding that because the reason why developers were really so held back in their productivity is because they had to build all their stuff on old machines and companies couldn't afford to buy new ones, whereas now they can literally give them the thing that they need for the project that they need and only pay for it while they're using it, and overall the costs are much reduced.
Right, and making sure that you're building just what you need locally. You could have, like we're using things like .NET Aspire, which is a orchestration system for things like microservices. Some of the services could be in Docker, some could be in the cloud, some could be local. I don't have to build the entire company on a laptop. That's not reasonable. And having the additional benefit of being able to do some of the work locally here on this laptop and then some of the work in the cloud is another example of being responsible with my resources.
Can we go back to that? Your colourful looking...
Oh, you mean the CRT that was goofy, this one here?
Yeah, let's talk about Linux.
Okay, so this here is a bit silly. This is WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, but you can notice that in my case here, I've made it look like an old-timey CRT. I'm going to turn that off, and the way I'll actually do it is I'll go to Settings right here. I'm going to click Open JSON File. This is the settings for the Windows terminal. Behind that is this, which is just a JSON file. And in that particular example there that looks like a CRT, I'm applying a shader, this experimental pixel shader path. What I'm going to do is I'm going to either comment that out or delete it. Okay, and we'll hit save. I've changed the settings directly. And then I'll close this terminal. You see now the terminal is colorful and looks the way you would expect, a Linux terminal. So you can really configure these things any way that you want. But I want to call out in the menu here, we've got PowerShell, which is boldface and my default. I've got Ubuntu. I've got the Azure Cloud Shell. I've got classic shells like Windows PowerShell and Command Prompt. And then developer ones that are actually auto-detected. The Windows terminal automatically detects these two and adds them to that menu automatically. One of the things that I can do here is I've got my Windows right there. I can click this, hold Alt with my left thumb, and split screen. So now I've got Ubuntu on the one side, and I've got Linux on Windows on the other side. And if I do this, here's the same code base. This is the Hanselman podcast, right? Actually, this is the main website, and that is the podcast. So this is the same code base on Windows. So if I build that, I'm hitting Control-Shift-B in both examples and running .NET Build on both. I've now run and built my application on Windows and on Linux because .NET is cross-platform. I'm going to go ahead and close this pane right here, and we'll just go ahead and go directly into full screen for Ubuntu. And this is really Linux. It's not like an emulator or a fake Linux. It is, if I run lsb release-a, it's Ubuntu 2204. So it's a pretty recent version of Ubuntu. And if I hit pwd for print working directory, you can see I'm in home Scott. And this is worth noting that I'm not in C:\users OneDrive. I'm in home Scott. This is really a Linux file system. That's the Linux file system. But my C drive is here. It's on Mount C. Okay, so I can go over there and look at it, but I don't want people to feel like this is not integrated with Windows. So check this out. This is a little trick. You type Explorer. This is a Windows application. I'm in Linux running a Windows application, and I'll pass in period or dot and hit enter. That's actually going to run the Windows Explorer and then open me into the Ubuntu folder. I'm in home Scott. It's actually connecting over a local network. Isn't that cool? It's seamless. And the point is you don't want to have to worry about these things. You want to stress them out. So look at this. This PC, my network, and Linux. Linux is actually a first-class citizen inside of the Windows Explorer, which means copying my files back and forth just works.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That just blows my mind. That's really incredible.
Here, I'm going to blow your mind even more. So watch this. So here we are in the Hanselman core folder. There's my source code. I showed that I could run explorer.exe. What if I ran Notepad? Well, Notepad, of course, if I just say Notepad, it's not a thing. But if I type notepad.exe, because it's integrated, this Linux is integrated with Windows, it's going to give Windows the opportunity to run Notepad. So Linux says I can't run that, and then it runs the Windows Notepad, which means I could then pass in, for example, like the readme.txt. Windows Notepad just opened the Linux file readme.txt. What is that, Michelle? What does that say?
It says Unix LF.
Okay. Do you remember carriage returns and line feeds?
Yes.
Right? You don't think about that much, right? You
Right.
think of carriage. I was a young person on my team said, I see carriage return line feed. What's the carriage and where is it returning? They've never seen a typewriter.
On a typewriter.
They've never seen a typewriter. A typewriter has a carriage that holds the paper, and when you go and then you go ding, and then you line feed. Carriage return is the returning of the carriage to the home, and then line feed. Carriage return line feed is what I would have if I was in Windows. Let's go to Windows here, and we're in the C user Scott HA. I'll type Notepad, and we'll say Michelle.txt. Did I spell your name wrong?
No.
Okay. Okay. So now here I am, and the line endings are CRLF, carriage return, enter, and line feed. Go there. So now let's go and type ABC. So So we have a file now called michelle.txt abc. Let's look at the file. It's got length 3. Okay, let's run that again. Okay, so I've got ABC, right? And it's 3 bytes. Now I'm going to push enter. Save the file. It's 5. Okay, that's weird. I only pushed enter. Well, where are the other 2 bytes? We have A, B, C, and then 2 more bytes. Apparently when I pushed enter, that was 2. So let's open up michelle.txt. Well, there's ABC again. Okay, we see down here in Visual Studio Code that end of line is CRLF. Let's open it up in a hex editor. Well, I don't have a hex editor. Hex is going to be the looking under. We're going to drive stick shift for a second here, right? So let's go over to extensions. I'll type hex editor. We'll grab one. There's a Microsoft one. It's got 4 million people installing it, so it must be good. Go back over here. I'll say hex editor. Open active file in hex editor. All right. A, B, C, and then you remember I pushed enter. 61, 62, 63, that's ASCII, right, the standard. 0D, that's hex for 13, which is an enter, and 0A, which is a line feed. So we have typewriter instructions to tell the typewriter, or the teletype, to move a carriage that doesn't exist, to feed a line that doesn't exist. But if we saved it in Linux, it would not be CRLF, it would just be LF. And if we open that in a hex editor, A, B, C, line feed. That is a thing that no one has thought about or worried about for 100 years, but developers mess up their line endings when they check things into Git, and Git takes care of it. And if you've ever copied a file, or maybe you probably opened a file in Notepad and it was all on one line, probably got it from a person who used a Mac or a person who used Linux, and then the tool will usually figure it out or format it. But I love understanding this kind of stuff, just like you like driving a stick shift, because it makes you understand the computer and what's underneath. It's a way of kind of going, what's behind that? What's going on behind that? And on Windows, you've been watching me just now hop seamlessly between Windows and Linux. And over here, when I type Notepad in Linux and I ran Notepad for Windows, I could type code, like VS Code, and hit dot. Look, installing Visual Studio Code server. Visual Studio Code just split in half. There is now a server running in Linux, and this that just popped up is the Windows Visual Studio Code. You can see right here in the corner it says WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. And if I go File, Open File, look at that path. It's home Scott. It's not C:. So half of Visual Studio is running in Windows. The other half is running in Linux. I can jump over here and type htop, and we can actually, which is like Task Manager for Linux people. We can scroll down, and we can find Visual Studio and .NET running in the background, listening. There it is, the Visual Studio Code server. So when I'm in Visual Studio Code and I type some code, maybe, and I go over here and I type, variable I equals, and then we get a drop down. That drop down was not generated by Windows, it was generated by Linux, because we're running in a Linux context. Windows is a great machine for writing Linux stuff. It's great for Windows, it's great for Linux, it's great for the cloud. And you saw how I've been just zipping around, moving in between these two worlds. It's not like a virtual machine. So whether it's local or remote or Linux or Windows or the cloud or not, one DevBox, my little Surface laptop is working for me.
I feel like we're living in the Matrix.
Isn't that silly? I just have such fun. I just want people to know about these things so that they can feel like it. So I like knowing about the history and explaining typewriters to young people who go like, oh, I get it now, because you don't need to know this. You don't need to know any of that, just like you don't need to drive a stick. But it just makes things more fun to go like, wow, it's 2024, and there's history behind why character turns and line feeds are messing up my Git repository today in the 21st century because of how we encoded our text in the 40s and 50s.
It reminds me of a talk I saw Dylan Beatty do. Have you seen that
That's
one?
a lovely talk that he's done, talking about Unicode and fonts and encoding and Morse code and how those things work. When I watch shows like the Benjamin Cumberbatch imitation game, when they go to the Bletchley Park in the UK and they break the Enigma code to help win World War II, those things echo into the code that we write today.
Yeah. I never think of those things, and then when I see them explained, it's so interesting. I don't even know how those ideas would get into your mind in the first place to think, what is that and why?
I just, when the toaster is broken, you could either buy a new toaster or you could take the toaster apart and then start thinking about the history of toast. That's just how I'm wired.
A real engineer at heart.
I don't know. I guess so.
Cool. Scott, we've gotten really deep into the tech today. So just to end on a lighter note, what is your one top tip that you would give to the next generation coming into tech careers?
Ooh, good question. Fundamentals. Fundamentals. Like, we joke about stick shift, but like, I'm not saying everyone needs to drive stick. But change a tire once. Build your own computer once. You don't have to do it all the time. I'm not saying that you need to be as excited about this stuff as I am, but open a hex editor once, we just did, and you go, oh, look at that. And you file it away, and then at some point in the future, it's going to come up. Maybe after this show that you're watching, you're going to mention carriage returns to your boss or to someone in the kitchen, and they're going to go, oh yeah, I had that issue with Git earlier today. So yeah, look at the fundamentals, get down one level below your comfort zone. So know where you are. You might be a Power Platform developer, you might be a Dynamics developer, you might be a C or C++ developer. Pick the level that you know you're at and go one level underneath just to get a little bit uncomfortable. That's where uncomfortable is where growth happens.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you, Scott. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely my pleasure.
Scott and I are going to stick around for another 10 minutes to answer your questions in chat. So put those in now if you haven't already. Thank you all for tuning in, and we hope that we will see you next time on New Breakpoint.
We hope you enjoyed this digital event. We have specialists on standby to answer your questions for a short while. To ask a question, type it into the chat window now and we'll get to it as quickly as we can. You'll also find a resources widget in the bottom middle of your screen. We've put additional links in there to learn more about what we've covered today. Lastly, tell us how you found this experience through the survey widget. If you're not staying for the Q&A, thank you for attending and we hope to see you again soon. We hope you enjoyed this digital event. Thank you for attending, and we hope to see you again soon.